Janitor caught at CEO's PC. Her code stunned him. Imagine discovering your janitor is the anonymous hero who rescued a billion-dollar network from ruin. What happens when her midnight code unravels a hidden corporate conspiracy and reveals her true identity as Elena Reed, a brilliant engineer silenced by injustice? Brace yourself for a heart-pounding tale of courage, betrayal, and redemption. You'll be riveted as she transforms from janitor to revered CTO, battling boardroom power plays and courtroom drama to claim her destiny. Where are you watching from? Comment below and subscribe now to soul-stirring stories to follow every unforgettable twist. And don't miss the next electrifying chapter. Caleb Stone's polished Oxfords clicked against the marble floor as he pushed open the glass door of his corner office. The city lights shimmered through the windows, casting reflections across the desks and monitors that lined the room. It was nearly midnight, yet one desk lamp remained illuminated, revealing a lone figure hunched over a keyboard. The hum of the air conditioning mingled with the distant whisper of traffic in the streets below, but the silence here was profound. Caleb hesitated, surprised to find anyone in the building. He stepped forward, curiosity warring with irritation. The woman's blonde hair was tied back, stray strands clinging to her forehead, and she wore a simple custodian uniform with a badge that read, Elena Reed. Her fingers froze above the keys as Caleb approached. His voice was crisp when he finally spoke. "What are you doing at my terminal?" Elena's eyes widened, and for a moment she only stared, as if searching for an escape. A bead of sweat rolled down her temple. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to intrude," she began, her voice trembling. "I noticed an error in the server backup logs and thought I could realign the timestamps." Caleb cut her off, arms folding across his chest. "You thought you could fix it?" His tone carried disbelief and disapproval. He gestured toward the screen. Elena nodded hesitantly, lips pressed together. He leaned in, eyes narrowing as he scanned the lines of code displayed. There was something familiar about the structure, the shorthand comments, the meticulous indentation. It was neither random nor amateurish. It bore the unmistakable signature of the anonymous developer known only as ER, the very patch that had saved Stonegate Systems from collapse 6 months earlier. A hush fell. Elena swallowed, anxiety flickering across her features. Caleb's jaw tightened as he processed the revelation. "You wrote this code?" he asked, voice softer now, but edged with awe. She met his gaze and nodded slowly, as if relief and fear warred behind her eyes. "I did," she admitted quietly. "I know I shouldn't have accessed your system directly, but I couldn't stand by and watch another breach destroy everything you've built." Caleb withdrew his hand from the intercom button he had begun to press, his anger dissipating into bewilderment. The silence between them stretched taut. The air felt charged, as if the room itself recognized the weight of this admission. Caleb recalled the late-night meetings with investors, the desperate calls from his IT director, and the sense of helplessness that had enveloped him. And now, here stood the culprit, or, rather, the savior, clad in a custodian's jacket. "Why remain hidden?" he finally asked, voice low. Elena's gaze hardened with resolve. "After I exposed corruption at my former employer, I was blacklisted," she explained. "No one would hire me, regardless of my skills. I had to survive, for my son, Leo. So I worked here, cleaning floors by day and coding in secret." Caleb ran a hand through his hair, silent for a moment. Guilt and admiration wrestled inside him. Then he exhaled and straightened, mind resolving itself around this new reality. "Tomorrow, at noon, my office," he said. "I want you to tell me everything." Elena blinked, relief flooding her features, but concern quickly followed. "What if they—" she began, worry pressing her words. Caleb raised a hand to forestall her fears. "This stays between us. No leaks, no rumors. Understood?" Her nod was almost imperceptible, but it was all the affirmation he needed. That night, Elena arrived home to her small Brooklyn apartment on a quiet side street. The walls were lined with scattered toys and framed photographs of her 6-year-old son, Leo. The scent of freshly laundered sheets mingled with the faint aroma of chamomile tea. She filled a mug, wrapped her fingers around its warmth, and allowed herself a moment to breathe. Memories flooded her, of sleepless nights debugging programs, of whispers in corporate corridors as her reputation was dismantled piece by piece, and of the solitary pride that had kept her going. Now there was fear, too. Fear of exposure, of losing this fragile second chance, and of what tomorrow held. Morning light filtered through the curtains as Elena prepared for her meeting. She pressed a clean uniform, brushed her hair until it gleamed, and tucked her badge neatly into her pocket. At precisely 12 o'clock, she stood outside Caleb's office, heart thudding. Caleb opened the door and greeted her with a nod of respect. His manner was calm, yet there was a spark in his eyes, an acknowledgement of her value beyond her job title. Inside the boardroom, the walls were lined with glass panels and polished wood accents. A projector displayed lines of code behind Caleb as he introduced Elena to the assembled executives. "This is Elena Reed," he announced, "the engineer who safeguarded our network." Elena stepped forward and spoke with quiet confidence, describing how she had traced anomalies in the logs, isolated the vulnerability, and crafted a precise patch under immense time pressure. Her words were clear, her expertise evident in every sentence. The executives exchanged glances as Elena concluded her explanation. The chairwoman, a formidable figure in a tailored suit, leaned forward and regarded Elena with respect. "Your work has been instrumental," she said. "We owe Stonegate's stability to your ingenuity and integrity." Elena's throat tightened. She forced a small nod, her breath catching with a mix of pride and relief. Caleb offered her a small, encouraging smile. In that moment, titles fell away. She was no longer invisible. After the meeting, Elena returned to her cart and continued her duties, sweeping the hallway outside the boardroom. Each sweep felt lighter, imbued with new possibility. She glanced back at the glass doors, where she had stood not long ago, a humble employee elevated by courage and skill. Caleb watched from within, his expression one of genuine admiration. He gave her a nod that spoke volumes more than words could say. That evening, Elena walked home under a sky dappled with stars and streetlights. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of blooming magnolias. She paused at a busy intersection, watching headlights stream past like rivers of light. In her pocket, her badge, once a symbol of limitation, felt like a key. She imagined Leo's bright smile when she told him tomorrow would be different. She thought of the code she had written, not just lines on a screen but a map to her own redemption, and she knew this was only the beginning. Truly, as she stepped back into the corridor, she carried with her not only a clean slate but the power to code her destiny, one line at a time, boldly. Elena Reed's mornings always began before dawn, with the soft hum of her aging laptop serving as both alarm and confidant. She would cradle her coffee mug in one hand, her son Leo's favorite action figure clutched in the other, and stare at the blank text editor blinking on the screen. Each line of code she typed felt like carving her own path through a world determined to erase her. At 26, fresh out of a junior developer contract at Cybernex, she had uncovered a subtle but deliberate backdoor siphoning funds from millions of customer transactions. She reported it discreetly, trusting the corporate machinery to do the right thing. Instead, she was escorted out under the guise of a routine security audit, her badge revoked, her access cut off, and her reputation trashed in hushed whispers among recruiters. Risk factor, they called her. Whistleblower. The word hung on her resume like a scarlet letter, leaving every prospective employer a heartbeat away from slamming the door in her face. In the months that followed, Elena's inbox remained eerily silent. She spruced up her LinkedIn profile, replaced her personal projects with sleek new repositories, and reached out to former colleagues, but no one dared vouch for her. Every interview ended with a scripted apology and a promise to keep her resume on file. Her savings dwindled as she spent nights debugging open-source projects and days assembling IKEA furniture for neighbors. She refused to give up on coding, but each rejection chipped away at her confidence. Late one evening, she found herself scavenging job boards for positions she lacked the formal degree to qualify for. And then she saw the listing. Night custodian at Stonegate Systems. The paycheck would cover rent and Leo's school supplies. The rest could wait. Her first day at Stonegate felt surreal. She donned the custodian uniform, a blue jumpsuit that smelled faintly of bleach and possibility, and clutched her cleaning cart through glass-walled corridors populated by suited executives and blinking servers. She swept floors with the same precision she once reserved for writing elegant functions, her mind constantly parsing command logs she glimpsed on unattended screens. At night, when the building emptied and the hum of machines replaced human chatter, she stole moments in empty offices to reconnect her portable hard drive, run self-authored scripts, and teach herself new security frameworks. The code was her sanctuary, a space where merit transcended title, and each successful compile felt like reclaiming a fragment of her identity. Despite the deception, Elena carried herself with quiet dignity. She greeted receptionists by name, learned the optimal cleaning routes to minimize disruption, and took pride in her work's tangible results, gleaming floors and sanitized keyboards. Yet her heart ached whenever she passed the CEO's office and saw his polished nameplate. Caleb Stone, a man she had never met but whose company she had once saved anonymously. She wondered if he ever paused to consider the person behind the midnight security patches that had restored faith in their systems. Every system log she studied hinted at latent vulnerabilities, each backup report a subtle invitation to intervene. She resisted the urge to act without permission, remembering the consequences that had stripped her of her livelihood at Cybernex. Elena's solitude was deepened by motherhood. Leo, bright-eyed and rambunctious, demanded dinner, homework help, and bedtime stories that always ended with a kiss and a whispered promise. She cherished those moments, yet they reminded her of what she had sacrificed: a career path, social validation, and a sense of belonging. When Leo slept, she returned to her laptop, eyes stinging from code-induced strain, hands trembling with caffeine and resolve. She patched vulnerabilities she never revealed, logged her fixes under the anonymous handle ER, and watched system metrics stabilize in real time. Each success was bittersweet, proof that she could still make a difference, yet shadowed by the fear of discovery and expulsion. Her dual life required meticulous planning. She mapped her cleaning schedule to the company's off-peak hours, ensuring she could access critical servers without interruption. She learned to navigate security cameras, timing her visits to restricted areas when guards changed shifts. She enlisted open-source tools to anonymize her IP address and routed her patch submissions through burner email accounts. The adrenaline rush of executing a flawless upload reminded her of late-night hackathons she once led, where camaraderie and shared purpose fueled breakthroughs. Now she worked alone, but the mission was unchanged: protect systems from collapse and prove that ethics and expertise outweighed pedigree. Rumors began to circulate among the technical staff about a phantom coder whose midnight updates patched errors in record time. Engineers exchanged excited glances, speculated on clandestine talent roaming their hallways, but dismissed the notion as urban legend. Elena watched from a distance, heart pounding whenever she overheard snippets of conversation. Whoever ER is, they're impressive. She felt a pang of pride, followed by guilt. Her secret couldn't remain hidden forever, and exposure meant risking her precarious stability. Late one night, she hesitated before submitting a critical hotfix for a zero-day exploit. She lingered at the keyboard, her finger hovering above the Enter key, torn between duty and self-preservation. The tipping point arrived when a malicious intrusion triggered a coordinated attack on Stonegate's payment processing network. Panic rippled through the IT department as alarms blared and dashboards turned crimson. Elena, witnessing the crisis unfold from her cleaning cart, recognized the signature of a bespoke malware strain she had studied months before. Without thinking, she slipped into the server room, her uniform blending with the shadows, and began typing a quarantine script from memory. The malware halted mid-execution. The network stabilized, and engineers watched in stunned silence as error counts plummeted. They traced the fix back to a newly authenticated patch rolled out seconds earlier, ER's patch. By morning, Caleb Stone summoned an emergency meeting. Engineers buzzed with adrenaline, collectively scratching their heads over the anonymous savior. "Who could have written such precise code?" Caleb demanded, his voice reverberating off glass walls. No one answered. Elena hovered near the back of the room, clutching her mop handle like a lifeline. She watched Caleb's frustration morph into determination as he vowed to unmask ER. Her heart thudded. This was the moment she had feared, yet also craved. She realized that staying anonymous no longer served her or the company she had saved twice. It was time to step out of the shadows. That afternoon, Elena returned to her janitorial closet, heart pounding. She retrieved her laptop from her bag, in plain sight, and carried it to Caleb's office. With hands trembling but voice steady, she knocked and entered uninvited. He looked up in surprise as she set her laptop on his polished desk and opened it to reveal lines of code time-stamped with her true name. Caleb's eyes widened, and for a moment he simply stared. "I'm Elena Reed," she said quietly. "I'm ER." The room fell silent as his analytical mind processed the revelation. Caleb closed the laptop and regarded her with renewed respect. His tone was softer now, tinged with awe. "You saved this company twice," he said, leaning back in his leather chair. Elena nodded, tears glistening at the corners of her eyes. "I couldn't stand by and watch it fall," she replied. She told him everything. The back door at Cybernex, her whistleblowing ordeal, her blacklisting, and the silent nights spent protecting Stonegate's systems. Caleb listened, his expression shifting from astonishment to empathy to resolve. That evening, Elena walked home under a sky of muted orange dusk, her badge lighter in her pocket and her heart heavier with anticipation. She no longer felt invisible. She carried the weight of her truth openly, ready to face consequences and opportunities alike. She thought of Leo's smile and knew that whatever came next, she had reclaimed her voice. Her past remained buried no longer in silence but unveiled in courage, and the world would never view her the same way again. Elena Reed had never felt more alive than in those quiet hours when the rest of Stonegate's campus lay empty, and her world was reduced to the soft glow of a laptop screen and the hum of cooling fans. Since Caleb Stone had entrusted her, under the codename ER, with the AI security initiative, her days blurred into a steady rhythm of janitorial duties and clandestine code contributions. Each night, after pushing her blue cleaning cart down the deserted corridors, she would slip into the server enclave Caleb had arranged for her, a small, windowless room outfitted with a lone desk, a high-end workstation, and an intricate network of monitors. The irony of trading her mop for cutting-edge hardware was not lost on her. The uniform she donned each morning now felt like armor she wore only to survive daylight hours. On her first official night as ER, Elena stared at the problem statement Caleb had provided. A machine learning module designed to detect anomalous network traffic was underperforming, missing subtle yet dangerous patterns that could signal an intruder. When she read through the data logs, she recognized the same flawed assumptions that had plagued systems at her former employer, Cybernex. She leaned forward, fingers hovering above the keyboard, feeling a flare of determination deep in her chest. The same fire that had once driven her to expose a covert backdoor siphoning billions. There was no hesitation in her approach. She rewrote the neural network's training algorithm, optimized feature extraction layers, and implemented a dynamic feedback loop that allowed real-time model adjustments. By dawn, her patch had increased detection accuracy by 22%. Elena shut down the workstation, heart pounding with a mixture of triumph and fear. The emptiness of the server room pressed in around her. She imagined ghosts of a dozen security specialists poring over her code, never suspecting it came from the night custodian whose footsteps they so often ignored. She rolled her cart back into the hallway, wiped her hands on her jumpsuit, and emerged into the pale blue light of pre-dawn. Her badge, hanging from a lanyard, seemed to mock her. Elena Reed, Janitor. But within the secure logs of Stonegate's most guarded systems, ER was fast becoming legend. Over the next week, subtle shifts rippled through the IT department. Engineers discovered that nodes which had previously failed automated vulnerability scans now passed with flying colors. Intrusion detection systems began flagging suspicious packets with uncanny precision, halting simulated attacks before they could compromise core services. In hushed conversations by coffee pots, whispers drifted. Who is ER? Where is she? A sense of exhilaration swept through teams that had grown accustomed to firefighting code. Elena, meanwhile, navigated her dual identity deftly. During the day, she mopped beneath desk chairs and emptied trash bins. By night, she was rewriting the future of Stonegate's cyber defenses. One evening, as she pushed her cart past the windowed offices of senior staff, she paused outside Caleb Stone's suite. From inside, she heard his voice, calm, purposeful, addressing his lieutenants. "We're on the verge of a breakthrough," he said. "ER's contributions have been invaluable, but we need to integrate this work at scale. I want a full integration plan by Monday." A thrill raced through her. He had spoken of her code as though it were a living, breathing ally in his fight to protect the company. She stepped away, chest tight with hope and dread. Would she ever summon the courage to reveal her true identity and claim her work? That weekend, she found herself at home in Brooklyn, preparing dinner for Leo. The modest apartment glowed with warm lamplight, and the scent of garlic-buttered pasta mingled with the laughter of her 6-year-old son. As she chopped vegetables, Leo pranced around the kitchen table, reciting lines from his favorite space adventure cartoon. "Mom, the Galactic Rangers need a secret weapon to stop the cosmic pirates," he declared, brandishing an action figure. Elena smiled, her mind spinning connections between interstellar defense and cybersecurity. She scooped pasta onto 2 plates and set them before Leo, who dove in enthusiastically. She watched his animated gestures and felt a pang. This was the reason she had endured the blacklists and layoffs, the reason she labored through long nights at Stonegate under a borrowed identity. For Leo's future, she would defy any barrier. After dinner, she tucked Leo into bed, reading him a constellation-themed story until his eyelids fluttered closed. She kissed his forehead, whispering, "Good night, Ranger Captain," and closed the door softly behind her. Down the hallway, the muffled hum of the city seeped through her window. Slipping back into her jumpsuit, she retrieved her laptop from a locked drawer. The screen flickered to life on the small desk she used as both coding station and makeshift command center. Before her lay the sprawling architecture of the AI security core she was building, modules of machine learning, threat intelligence feeds, adaptive firewall rules. She sipped cold coffee and dove back into the code. Midnight passed unnoticed as she refactored legacy modules, incorporated continuous integration pipelines, and devised self-healing scripts that could automatically quarantine malfunctioning services. Her fingers flew across the keyboard in a rhythm honed through years of coding under pressure. Every successful compile, every green build passed notification, was an affirmation that she belonged here. By 4 a.m., she leaned back, exhausted but exhilarated, having sculpted an end-to-end security framework that could proactively prevent attacks rather than merely react to them. She packaged her contributions, pinged them to a secure repository, and logged out, leaving no trace but an audit entry under the ER handle. On Monday morning, Stonegate's executive board gathered for a briefing. Caleb Stone stood at the head of the table, eyes bright with anticipation. He clicked through a presentation charting the performance gains from ER's interventions. Fewer false positives, faster incident response times, and a self-adjusting AI engine that learned from every attempted breach. Board members murmured their approval, leaning forward to examine graphs and network diagrams. "These results exceed our most optimistic forecasts," Caleb declared. "We're looking at a system that doesn't just defend, it adapts, improvises, and evolves. ER has set a new standard for cybersecurity." He paused, letting his words resonate. Elena, hidden among the cleaning staff outside the boardroom door, pressed her hand to her chest and drew a breath. She listened to the clock tick, imagining herself 10 feet away, rather than 10 stories below. That afternoon, grateful for a lull in her janitorial rounds, Elena found herself standing outside Caleb's office door, cart resting beside her. The hallway felt charged, as if fate had conspired to place her here. She braced her shoulders and knocked. Caleb's voice responded immediately, and she stepped inside, cart in tow. His office was bathed in late-day sunlight, casting long shadows across the sleek surfaces. He motioned her forward with a nod. "ER's framework is exactly what we need," he began, eyes meeting hers with earnest intensity. "But we must integrate it across all divisions. I want you to lead the effort, officially, under your name." Elena froze, heart pounding. For months, she had hidden behind initials, protecting her reputation and her livelihood. To work under her real name was to risk everything: exposure, backlash, guilt. Yet, as she looked into Caleb's expectant eyes, she felt the embers of courage spark to life. He offered a single sheet of paper, a non-disclosure agreement written with her name, her real name, at the top. He slid it across the desk. "This is your opportunity to own your contributions," he said softly, "to step out of the shadows." Tears welled in Elena's eyes as she took the pen. She looked down at the agreement, then back at Caleb, and nodded. "Thank you," she whispered. In that moment, the barriers between custodian and engineer dissolved. She signed her name, forging a new chapter in her life. The knock of her pen on paper echoed through the quiet office like a bell heralding dawn. Soon after, the server enclave she had once occupied in secret was refurbished into Elena's official workspace. A company-issued badge appeared on her desk beside a monitor that displayed her full name: Elena Reed, Senior Security Architect. The blue jumpsuit was retired, replaced by business casual attire and a personalized security pass. During her first day in the new role, she passed through door scanners with pride, surprising neither the guards who greeted her nor the engineers who now sought her expertise openly. When Caleb stopped by her desk to share a congratulatory smile, she felt the warmth of validation flood her chest. That evening, as she left the building with Leo in tow, she paused on the steps of Stonegate's headquarters. He chattered excitedly about his day, show and tell at school, friends' grades, tomorrow's science fair. She listened, smiling, as stars winked overhead. The journey from secret coder to recognized leader had been fraught with risk, but with Caleb's belief and her own resolve, she had carved a place for herself by the light of her own brilliance. And as Leo tugged her hand toward home, she walked beside her son not as an invisible janitor, but as an engineer who had rekindled her own fire, and in doing so, transformed her life forever. Elena Reed's steps echoed down the polished hallway as she made her way toward the conference room, mop silently trailing behind her. She'd heard the rumors whispered in hushed tones over the past week. An internal complaint had been filed against ER, the phantom engineer whose brilliant midnight patches had saved Stonegate's network twice. But she never imagined the culprit would be Miles Granger, the company's chief operating officer, the man who controlled budgets and boardroom agendas with an iron grip. When she arrived, the room's glass walls revealed a tense tableau. Caleb Stone at the head of the table, arms folded, eyes locked on Miles, who stood beside a projector screen displaying Elena's real name and photograph lifted from her security badge. Her heart froze. Miles's voice cut through the silence like a scalpel. "I'm not convinced we can trust someone with her history," he said, gesturing toward the image. A whistleblower who was blacklisted after exposing corruption at her last employer. If her judgment failed once, what's to stop it again? We need accountability, not secrecy. He clicked the remote, cycling through slides of Elena's tenure at Cybernex, highlighting her unauthorized access, her security breach, her litigation. Each word on the screen felt like a hammer blow, driving nails into the coffin of her anonymous contributions. Caleb's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. Elena stood rooted by the doorway, uniform crisp, but her spirit frayed. She felt Miles's accusation not just as professional skepticism, but as a personal betrayal. He had turned her greatest asset into evidence of risk. She remembered the nights she'd spent barefoot in server rooms, rewriting algorithms to block intrusions that threatened the livelihoods of every employee here. She had risked everything to protect Stonegate, yet now her past was paraded as proof that she didn't belong. Her throat burned as she swallowed. Caleb finally spoke, voice steady but eyes shadowed. "I hired Elena because she's earned my trust," he said. "Those midnight patches weren't accidents. They were crafted by someone who understands our systems better than anyone. We need her expertise, publicly, officially." And he paused, but Miles interjected. "Officially under her real name? That exposes us to liabilities." Caleb's gaze flicked to Elena's photo, then back to Miles. He opened his mouth to defend her, but the words died on his lips. The board members exchanged uneasy looks. Hesitation seeped into the room like a slow poison. Elena took a trembling breath. She had rehearsed her next move 1,000 times. Plead her case, remind them of the crises she had prevented, appeal to Caleb's sense of justice. But the sight of Miles's triumphant smirk and Caleb's faltering conviction drained her will. Without a word, she stepped into the room. All eyes turned to her as she brushed past the glass door's edge, rain-slicked hair falling over her badge, now gleaming under the fluorescent lights. "I'm done hiding," she announced, voice firm despite the tremor beneath. "If you doubt my integrity, then I don't belong here." She set her mop against the wall, shoulders squared, and turned away. Miles's lips curved into a dismissive sneer, but even he hesitated when he saw the steel flicker in her eyes. Caleb rose, as if to call her back, but he remained silent. Elena's footsteps echoed louder now as she crossed the lobby, each click of her shoes a testament to her resolve. Her heart pounded with sorrow and liberation in equal measure. Sorrow that her sanctuary had become a cage. Liberation in reclaiming her agency. Through the glass doors she strode, past curious glances of cleaning staff and engineers alike, their whispers swelling behind her. That's Elena Reed, the janitor, the phantom coder. Outside, the night air wrapped around her like a cloak. She paused beneath the company signage, its neon letters flickering in the drizzle. Behind her, light spilled from the lobby doors, the promise of continued battles within. Ahead, the empty sidewalk stretched toward her apartment, toward the small boy who needed his mother more than any corporation needed her code. Elena lifted her chin, rain dotting her jacket's lapel, and began to walk. The photograph of her and Caleb with Leo, leaked moments ago by some hidden hand, flickered across her phone's screen, casting ghostly reflections on the pavement. The world would see the story they wanted. A secret affair between CEO and a subversive engineer, a scandal ripe for headlines. But Elena Reed had stories of her own to tell, stories of truth, of courage, of forging one's place in the world against all odds. With each step, she vowed to write her next chapter on her own terms, unbound by others' judgments. And though the night felt cold, a quiet fire burned within her, guiding her home. Elena Reed sat on the edge of her threadbare sofa, the glow of her laptop casting long shadows in the cramped Brooklyn apartment she shared with her 6-year-old son, Leo. Outside, the city's cacophony of car horns and distant sirens wove through the night, but inside, the space felt suffocatingly quiet. She ran a hand through her damp hair, guilt and exhaustion knotting in her chest. Earlier that day, an anonymous tip, planted by Miles Granger, had spread across every corner of Stonegate Systems. Elena Reed, once a whistleblower at Cybernex, was no longer protected by the anonymity of her codename, ER. Her footprints had been traced from the clandestine server room to Caleb Stone's private office. The board demanded answers. The same company she'd saved twice now labeled her a threat. She had fled the headquarters with her uniform clutched in her fist, stumbling into the lobby past guards who gawked as though she were a criminal. She hadn't stopped running until she reached home, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure Leo would wake from his slumber. She stared at the darkened hallway, imagining him curled up beneath the blankets, his small frame rising and falling in peaceful sleep. She wished more than anything she could shield him from the coming storm. But even as she vowed to shield him, her courage faltered. How could she face the board? How could she allow herself to step back into that glass-walled courtroom and be judged, not for the code she wrote, but for the scandal they insisted defined her? Doubt swirled, threatening to drown the flicker of defiance that had driven her to protect Stonegate's systems. She closed her eyes, recalling the night she patched the zero-day exploit from a public terminal in a janitor's uniform, heart hammering with the knowledge that detection would cost her everything. She had acted out of principle, out of duty. Would principle alone be enough to save her now? A soft knock at the door jolted her from the spiral of fear. She tensed, mind racing with possibilities. Was it the press? A bailiff? Someone sent by Miles to drag her back? But when she opened it, Caleb Stone stood there, coat slung over one shoulder, concern etched in his every line. His hair, usually immaculately styled, was rumpled, and his suit bore a faint smudge of dirt, evidence perhaps that he had tracked her down across the city. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence stretched like a bridge between guilt and resolve. Then Caleb lifted a hand as though to steady himself against the magnitude of what he was about to say. "I came to bring you home," he said softly. His voice, usually crystalline and authoritative, wavered with emotion. "I shouldn't have let them push you out." Elena blinked, tears pricking as she stepped aside to let him in. He set his coat on the armchair, eyes flitting around the small living room as though seeing her life for the first time. The small table strewn with Leo's drawings, the paperback books stacked in a corner, the faded family photo taped to the wall. "I saw how they looked at you," Caleb said, voice tight. "I heard the whispers. I failed you, and I'm sorry." His admission was a mirror of her own self-reproach, and for the first time since the leak, her anger flared. "You should have said something," she whispered, voice cracking. "You had the power." Caleb swallowed, stepping closer, the weight of his own regrets heavy on his shoulders. "I was afraid," he confessed, "afraid of jeopardizing the company, afraid of the board, afraid of losing everything I've built. But then I realized I was more afraid of losing you." Elena's pulse stuttered at the words, a lifeline cast across their shared vulnerability. She folded her arms, struggling to maintain composure. "You protected me when I had nowhere else to turn," she said, voice steadying, "but today I have to protect myself." She sat back down on the sofa, wrapping her arms around herself. Caleb paused, searching her face for a sign of relinquishment. Then he took a seat beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence through the thin fabric of his shirt. "They'll call me at dawn," she murmured. "They'll demand an explanation, demand my dismissal, and when they do, I'll have no choice but to fight or run." Caleb reached out and gently brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "You don't have to choose alone," he said quietly. "I'm going to stand by you. No more hiding, no more running." She closed her eyes, letting the sincerity of his promise wash over her. The panic that had gripped her chest loosened, replaced by a fragile hope. Even so, doubt lingered like static in her mind. "What about Leo?" she asked. "They'll use him against me." Caleb's gaze softened as he slipped an arm around her shoulders. "He's going to need to see his mother stand up for what's right," he said, "and I'll make sure he's safe." Elena took a shaky breath, meeting his gaze. She saw not only his remorse, but also an unwavering resolve. It was a resolve born from months of working alongside her, from seeing the brilliance in her midnight patches and the integrity in every line of code. She had given him proof that titles were meaningless. Now it was his turn to prove he believed in her. Late into the night, they sat together, planning their course. They discussed the board meeting, how Caleb would introduce her not as a liability, but as the engineer whose contributions had become the backbone of the company's security. They prepared talking points: the zero-day exploit she had neutralized, the AI-enhanced framework she had architected, the dozens of breaches she had prevented under the cover of darkness. They anticipated Miles's objections and drafted counter-arguments rooted in data and principle. As the hours passed, Elena's confidence grew. The chalk outlines of her fear faded, replaced by the firm stroke of purpose. When dawn's first light edged through the curtains, Elena rose from the sofa, renewed. She dressed in the uniform she had forsaken yesterday. Her blue jumpsuit, freshly laundered and crisp, its badge pinned firmly over her heart. Leo's drawing stared back at her from the refrigerator door, bright rockets and planets she had promised to help him paint next weekend. She took a deep breath and tucked the memory of his innocent smile into her mind's pocket, discovering that it fueled her determination rather than weakening it. Caleb watched her prepare, dressing in his own suit with an anxious care. "Are you ready?" he asked, voice low but steady. Elena nodded, offering him a small, genuine smile. "I am." They left the apartment hand in hand, a united front stepping out onto the bustling sidewalk. Passers-by barely spared them a glance, but each footstep carried them closer to the glass towers of Stonegate's headquarters. Inside, the afternoon sun glinted off mirrored surfaces, and the hum of air vents echoed through empty corridors as they ascended to the boardroom. Elena's chest fluttered, but she kept her gaze forward, her stride unwavering. Caleb opened the door and ushered her in, standing at her side as the board members looked up in surprise. Miles rose to speak, mouth opening in an accusation, but Caleb cut him off. "Before you question Elena's motives," Caleb began, voice ringing clear, "understand that her work has been the single greatest factor in our company's stability this year." He gestured to Elena. "She has earned a platform to speak, not a platform to hide behind." Elena stepped forward, calm and collected. She recounted her journey, the night she patched the exploit from a janitor's uniform, the countless lines of code she had written to safeguard their systems, the personal cost she had borne to remain anonymous. She spoke of duty, of ethics, and of the fundamental truth that talent and integrity know no job title. When she finished, the boardroom was silent, awestruck by her honesty and her brilliance. The chairwoman, a stern figure in a tailored jacket, leaned forward. "Your transparency is as valuable as your skill," she said. "We were wrong to doubt you." A ripple of agreement passed around the table. Miles glared but said nothing. His power had dissipated in the face of Elena's integrity and Caleb's unwavering support. Finally, the chairwoman addressed Elena directly. "We would like to offer you a permanent position as Chief Security Architect under your real name with full access and full recognition." Elena felt the room shift beneath her. Fear and triumph warred for control, but she lifted her head, meeting the chairwoman's gaze with gratitude and resolve. "Thank you," she replied, voice strong. "I won't let you down." Later, as they exited the boardroom together, morale among the staff was palpable. Engineers applauded in the hallway. Receptionists offered congratulatory smiles. And at that moment, Elena Reed felt the full weight of belonging settle upon her shoulders. Not as a disguise, not as a renegade coder, but as a recognized architect of Stonegate's future. Beside her, Caleb looped an arm through hers, pride shining in his eyes. Together, they walked toward the future they had chosen to face, no longer defined by fear or secrecy, but by courage and conviction. Elena Reed sat in the packed courtroom, the polished oak bench beneath her a stark contrast to the cold metal of the handcuffs she had once worn in her past life. She took a steadying breath, steadying herself against the swirl of camera flashes and murmurs that filled the gallery. Before her sat a panel of austere judges whose expressions betrayed nothing. Lawyers in impeccable suits whose pens hovered eagerly over notepads, and a sea of strangers whose stare carried the weight of preconception. One table held representatives from Cybernex, their faces drawn and determined. Across the aisle, Caleb Stone and a handful of Stonegate Systems engineers watched with rapt attention, ready to lend their support. Miles Granger, Stonegate's COO, stood off to the side, arms crossed, a scowl darkening his features, an unspoken reminder that not everyone in her adopted company believed she deserved this moment. Elena closed her eyes for an instant and recalled the path that had led her here. She remembered the clandestine nights spent patching failing servers, the adrenaline in her veins as she typed the lines of code that had saved Stonegate from ruin, the long silences of her own apartment as she agonized over every keystroke. She thought of Leo, her 6-year-old son, waiting anxiously at home, trusting in the mother who had once chased shadows of corporate corruption and now stood on the precipice of vindication. She let the memory of his laughter anchor her courage, then opened her eyes and rose. "Please state your full name and occupation for the record," the presiding judge intoned, voice echoing through the high-ceilinged chamber. "Elena Reed," she replied, voice clear. "Senior Security Architect at Stonegate Systems." A murmur rippled through the room as her title registered. The judge inclined her head, and Elena took her place behind the witness stand. The opposing counsel, sleek, confident, wielding years of corporate litigation like a shield, rose and placed a leather-bound binder on the lectern. "Ms. Reed," he began, eyes narrowing, voice polite but edged with challenge, "you are here today because Cybernex alleges that you, during your tenure there, illegally accessed and modified proprietary software belonging to your former employer. Is that correct?" Elena nodded. "They allege that. I'm here to demonstrate the truth." He opened his binder to a thick stack of documents. "You were employed in a junior developer position at Cybernex. You discovered a backdoor in their billing system that redirected funds to a private account. You reported it through internal channels. A week later, your credentials were revoked. You were escorted off the premises and your badge was deactivated. You were never given an opportunity to defend yourself publicly. Subsequently, you emailed an anonymous patch, which we now know you wrote, to Stonegate Systems that prevented a catastrophic breach. Would you confirm those events?" Each question landed like a hammer, but Elena answered succinctly. "Yes. I discovered the back door, reported it properly, and was wrongfully terminated. The patch was unsolicited. I wrote it under the pseudonym ER because I believed in the responsibility to protect sensitive systems, regardless of personal cost." The lawyer nodded, flipping pages to financial logs. "And you acknowledge that modifying proprietary software without authorization constitutes a breach of contract and potential theft of intellectual property." Elena paused only for a heartbeat before replying. "At Cybernex, when I discovered the unauthorized siphoning of customer funds, I had a moral and legal obligation to ensure it was stopped. The code I created addressed a vulnerability they refused to correct. My actions were in defense of public interest and company integrity." The courtroom buzzed. A few jurors exchanged glances. The chairperson of the board leaned forward, curious rather than disapproving. The counsel pursed his lips, shifting gears. "Ms. Reed, you understand that whistleblower protections are limited under the law. You acted without a formal declaration or press involvement. You took matters into your own hands. How do you justify unilateral action that could have compromised data security?" Elena squared her shoulders. "I used every available internal channel before taking action. When those channels failed, millions of customers remained vulnerable. I crafted a patch that closed the exploit without disrupting service. No data was lost, no customer funds were diverted. If that is compromising data security, I stand by it." A hush fell as she spoke. Conviction resonated in her tone. The judge jotted notes, her expression thoughtful. The opposing counsel consulted his binder, then launched into a flurry of technical minutiae: timestamps, code snippets, version control logs. Elena listened, then responded with calm precision, explaining how her patch aligned with best practices, how she documented every change, and how logs proved her code was original, built from scratch on her personal workstation long after her departure from Cybernex. She spoke of the ethics that drove her, the sleepless nights debugging and testing, and the simple truth that no one else had been willing to act. Each word carried the weight of truth she had shouldered alone. Midway through cross-examination, Caleb rose. The judge nodded at him. He advanced to the lectern. "Your Honors, permit me a brief direct examination." His voice was steady and respectful. Ms. Reed had no formal obligation to assist Stonegate Systems, yet she did so at great personal risk. Her expertise and integrity have saved my company twice. If her actions were suspicious, why did our security logs, our engineers, and our stakeholders benefit without harm? Why do we stand here, secure because of her? He produced a flash drive and projected network analytics. Breach attempts neutralized, system uptime preserved, threat detection metrics that had soared under Elena's guidance. The board members leaned in, impressed. The jurors watched Caleb's presentation with growing admiration. When Caleb sat, Elena glanced at him. Gratitude warmed her. She turned back to the counsel, whose face was now a mask of concern. The judge called a recess. In the hush, Elena stepped down, her legs trembling. Caleb offered her a supportive nod as she walked toward her counsel table. Miles Granger approached, eyes cold. "You're gambling your future on stunt code," he hissed. "Remember, LaFair Reed is still a scandal waiting to explode." Elena met his gaze calmly. "I know what I risk," she said softly, "but I won't hide behind shadows anymore." The recess ended, and proceedings resumed with closing arguments. Cybernex's attorney painted Elena as reckless, a vengeful former employee whose clandestine actions, though well-intentioned, violated protocols and intellectual property rights. The court must hold her accountable, he concluded. Otherwise, the rule of law collapses. Then Caleb's lawyer stood, voice ringing. Ms. Reed acted at every step with professionalism, skill, and moral clarity. She exposed wrongdoing, she protected millions of customers, and she prevented a corporate collapse. Her actions embody civic duty and technical excellence. To punish her would be to punish decency, intelligence, and courage. Elena felt a swell of emotion, but remained composed. As the judge delivered instructions to the jury, she closed her eyes briefly, offering silent thanks to every lonely hour spent perfecting her craft. The jury's deliberation felt endless, but when they returned, their verdict was clear. Unanimously dismiss the charges. The clerk's voice echoed, "Not guilty." A low murmur of astonishment swept the courtroom. Caleb's engineers exhaled. Even some Cybernex representatives looked downcast. Miles's scowl deepened. Elena's heart thundered as she stood, the weight of judgment lifting from her shoulders. The judge pronounced the case closed, commending her bravery and professionalism. Outside the courthouse, a throng of reporters clamored. Caleb ushered Elena to a waiting podium where flashing bulbs illuminated both their faces. He raised a hand for quiet. "Today, justice was served," he announced. "Elena Reed is not only vindicated, she is a pioneer in cybersecurity ethics and excellence. Stonegate Systems is proud to have her lead our security division under her real name, the name she earned, not the alias she hid behind." The crowd's applause thundered, reporters shouting questions. Elena raised a hand to silence the cacophony, heart pounding but voice steady. "Thank you," she began, eyes meeting the cameras. "I am grateful for this outcome, not for me alone, but for every professional who fights for integrity and technology. Let this be a marker that talent, ethics and courage transcend title, circumstance, and fear. She paused, then added, and let it remind us all that sometimes the greatest innovations come from those brave enough to act when rules fail. I look forward to building a safer future, side by side with every engineer, every stakeholder, and every curious mind willing to challenge the status quo. Caleb placed a supportive hand on her shoulder as the journalist's flashbulbs swirled. Together, they walked down the courthouse steps, greeted by cheering Stonegate employees. Elena felt the warmth of vindication surge through her. No longer anonymous, no longer hidden, she was free to be both mother and engineer, both protector and pioneer. As Caleb led her toward a waiting car, she glanced at the towering skyline, thinking of Leo's bright future. She realized that this victory, hard-won and public, was not an ending, but a launching pad. A validation that actions driven by conscience and code could indeed change the world. Elena Reed stood just off stage in the dimly lit wings of the grand hall, heart drumming against her ribs like a tribal war chant. She wore a tailored navy blazer over a simple white blouse, far from her custodian uniform, yet still comforting in its crisp simplicity. In her hand, she clutched the small index card bearing her speech, though she barely dared peek at it now. Beyond the velvet curtain, rows upon rows of seats held a sea of expectant faces. Industry leaders, journalists, venture capitalists, and engineers from around the globe, all gathered to witness the unveiling of the AI Security Core. Tonight, her name, Elena Reed, would be spoken not in whispers of rumor, but in the clear, resonant tones of recognition. She inhaled deeply, filling her lungs with oxygen and purpose, then nodded to the stage manager. It was time. The curtains parted, and a spotlight found her as she stepped onto the polished maple floor. Flashes from cameras erupted like distant fireworks, but she stayed her course, lifting her chin and meeting the lights head-on. At the center of the stage, a single podium awaited. She approached it, each step measured, the muted click of her heels echoing in the hushed hall. Behind her, the massive projection screen displayed the Walker Tech logo in sleek silver letters, and beneath it, her name, Elena Reed, Chief Security Architect. The sight of her own name in bold type sent a shiver of validation twisting through her spine. Taking a calming breath, she rested both hands on the podium's edge and surveyed her audience. They looked back with curiosity, admiration, and, in a few faces, polite skepticism, remnants of doubt she had overcome. A murmur of anticipation rolled through the crowd, and she smiled, genuine and unguarded. "Good evening," she began, voice steady and warm. "Thank you all for joining me tonight at the National Tech Summit. Standing here, I am deeply honored and a little astonished to be introduced as the architect of the AI Security Core." Her words were met with polite applause, and she sensed the tension in the room ebb slightly. She paused, letting the moment settle before continuing. "I want to share with you not just the mechanics of our new system, but the journey that brought me here, and the people behind it." Her gaze flicked briefly to the wings, where she imagined Caleb Stone seated front row, offering an encouraging nod. 6 months ago, I walked these halls in a different role entirely. By day, I was a custodian, entrusted with the care of our facilities. By night, I was a clandestine engineer, rebuilding our security systems under a pseudonym. The lines of code I wrote were never meant to earn me a title, only to protect the integrity of this company and the data of our users. Soft gasps rippled through the audience as she spoke the truth of her past. She could feel the weight of every story they had heard, every rumor they had whispered about ER, the anonymous savior of Walker Tech. Now, she claimed that narrative openly. "I imagine many of you have faced moments where your expertise outstripped your opportunities," she said, her tone compassionate. "You know the dissonance of being unseen, of having the skills yet not the credentials, the drive but not the recognition. I know it well." She paused again, scanning the crowd. "Yet, here's what I learned. It only takes one person who believes in your potential to change everything." A ripple of applause greeted that acknowledgement of shared struggle. Elena felt a surge of connection. These people understood the valley from which she had emerged. For me, that person was Caleb Stone, CEO of Walker Tech, she continued, a note of gratitude infusing her voice. He looked past the uniform and saw the code beneath. The same code that had patched vulnerabilities, halted breaches, and stabilized our network when crisis struck. He offered me a chance. First, to work anonymously, then to serve openly as senior security architect, and finally, to stand before you today. A spotlight flickered at the edge of her vision, and she allowed herself a quiet smile. "But tonight isn't about me alone," she said, stepping back from the podium and letting her arms open wide. The screen behind her shifted, displaying a mosaic of photos, midnight server rooms, lines of code scrolling across monitors, hastily scribbled diagrams, and candid shots of engineers working late hours. It's about every untold innovator whose contributions remain hidden behind job titles or overlooked by assumptions. It's about the countless nights spent debugging code, testing patches, and envisioning solutions, often without acknowledgement, often without applause. She let her words settle before delivering the climactic reveal. The AI security core you see on this screen is more than an architecture. It's a testament to the principle that talent transcends titles, and that courage isn't predicated on pedigree. Our system employs adaptive machine learning to identify and neutralize threats in real time. It continuously analyzes network telemetry, autonomously isolates anomalies, and deploys countermeasures without human intervention, while preserving data integrity and minimizing false positives. It learns from every attempted breach, evolving its defenses to meet new challenges before they can manifest. The screen lit up with dynamic animations. Data flows bypassing honeypots. Simulated attacks diverted. Incident response metrics plummeting. The audience breathed in unison at the display of technical prowess. "And yet," she said softly, letting the contrast sink in, "the most groundbreaking aspect of this system is not its code. It's the belief that inspired it, the belief that faces change, logos change, but the relentless pursuit of a safer digital world remains constant." She closed her eyes for a heartbeat, then opened them to the glowing crowd. "So, tonight, I invite you to join me in redefining how we value innovation. Let us seek out the hidden architects in every corner of our organizations. Let us cultivate cultures of trust, where expertise is recognized not by credentials alone, but by impact. And let us remember that sometimes the greatest solutions come from the most unexpected places." As she concluded, the hall exploded in applause. It started as polite claps but quickly grew into a thunderous standing ovation. Elena felt tears sting her eyes as she stepped back, allowing the adulation to wash over her. She lowered her head in gratitude, heart pounding with a mix of relief, pride, and humility. When the applause finally subsided, she offered a final bow and stepped away from the podium. Backstage, the stage manager clasped her hand, beaming, but Elena barely noticed. Her focus was on the audience, on Caleb rising from his seat, a proud smile lighting his face, and on the engineers applauding with tears in their eyes. She realized that tonight she had not only validated her own journey, but had also illuminated a path for others who felt unseen. Later that evening, in a quieter corner of the after-party, Elena sipped sparkling water as colleagues lined up to congratulate her. She laughed softly as she described how she once covertly accessed servers under the guise of emptying trash. She watched as a young intern's eyes widened with admiration, and she offered him words of encouragement that she so desperately wished she had heard early in her career. Finally, when the crowd thinned and the lights dimmed, Elena slipped outside onto the rooftop terrace. The city skyline glittered around her, a tapestry of lights reflecting possibility. She pulled out her phone and dialed Caleb's number. His familiar voice answered first ring. "Elena? You were incredible." She smiled, leaning against the stone balustrade. "Thank you," she replied softly. But tonight, everyone was incredible. Below, the after-party's music drifted upward, a distant beat matching her own pulse. She tucked her phone away and gazed out at the horizon, thinking of Leo sleeping peacefully in his bed, dreaming of rockets and robots, unaware that his mother had just rewritten the rules of what was possible. In that moment, Elena Reed knew that the stage was indeed hers, not because she claimed it, but because she had earned it by perseverance, integrity, and an unbreakable belief in her own worth. And as the night wore on, the lights of the city seemed to echo her conviction. Innovation knows no uniform, and courage no credentials. The future belonged to those brave enough to step forward, and tonight she had illuminated the way. They strolled through the sun-dappled path of Elmwood Park, autumn leaves crunching underfoot like a gentle applause to mark the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Elena Reed walked between Caleb Stone and her son, Leo, her hand clasped in Caleb's as Leo darted ahead, collecting vibrant red and gold leaves in a small metal bucket. The mountain of challenges she had faced, the courtroom drama, the boardroom battles, the endless nights disguised as a janitor, felt distant now, like a half-remembered fever dream. In its place was this perfect tableau, a woman who had reclaimed her name and her dignity, beside the man who had seen her true value, and ahead of her, a son whose laughter was her most treasured declaration of all. Leo paused to examine a particularly spectacular maple leaf, its edges curled into a delicate lace of color. "Mom, look!" he called, thrusting the bucket toward her and beaming as though he'd discovered treasure untold. Elena knelt, brushing fringes of hair behind her ear, and held the leaf between thumb and forefinger. The veins were like tiny rivers of ruby and amber against the waning light, a reminder that change could be glorious rather than frightening. "It's beautiful, Leo," she said, her voice soft with wonder. He nodded, pride shining in his eyes, then scampered forward to show Caleb the collection of stones he'd gathered along the park's pond edge. Caleb fell into step beside Elena, his presence quiet yet unwavering. "He's a natural collector," he observed, a playful glint in his eye, "much like his mother." Elena smiled, leaning into Caleb's shoulder as they walked. The warmth of his arm around her was more comforting than any corporate accolade or public recognition had ever been. For months, she had measured her worth by lines of code and crisis averted. Now she measured it by moments like this, simple, unguarded, and infinitely precious. She thought of the day she'd signed her NDA under a false name, her heart pounding with vulnerability. Today, she walked under her true name, free of fear, guided instead by love. They reached a wooden bench beneath a canopy of amber leaves and sat. Leo climbed onto Caleb's lap first, then scooted over so Elena could curl beside him. The three of them fit together like puzzle pieces finely found. Elena gazed at Leo's upturned face as he pointed out a family of ducks gliding along the water's surface. "Look at how they glide," he whispered, as though revealing a sacred secret. She winked at him. "They make it look easy, don't they?" She thought of her own gliding, finally moving through waters she had once navigated only by stealth and caution. Now the current felt gentle, the waves welcoming rather than threatening. A soft breeze stirred overhead, scattering leaves like confetti around them. Elena caught one in her palm and turned it over, studying its veins. "I used to think my path was set," she confessed, voice low. "That once the world labeled me, I'd be stuck in that label forever." She looked up at the sky, where clouds drifted like floating dreams. "But life is more like these leaves, always changing, always letting go, and starting anew." Caleb's hand found hers, fingers intertwining. "You didn't just let go," he said. "You transformed yourself. You were a custodian of code long before anyone knew your name. That's never going to change?" Elena smiled, tears brimming at the corner of her eyes. "I suppose I'm still a custodian," she agreed. "Only now I clean up more than messes. I help build the safeguards that keep people's lives intact." She glanced at Leo, now leaning his head against Caleb's chest to watch the ducks. "And I have someone to build it for. I get to show him that courage and integrity matter more than fear." The thought filled her chest so completely that her worries about board votes, public perception, and press scrutiny seemed to vanish. They lingered there as afternoon waned into early evening, the park's amber hues deepening in the golden hour. Hikers and dog walkers passed by, some glancing at the family and offering smiles of recognition, proof that Elena's journey had resonated beyond the corporate confines of her workplace. A small gathering of Stonegate engineers on a weekend coding retreat waved from afar, prompting Caleb to wave back spiritedly. Elena returned the greeting, her heart swelling at the camaraderie that had once remained hidden behind the glow of midnight screens. She realized that in claiming her place openly, she had given permission to others to step out of the shadows too. As twilight approached, Leo yawned, heavy-lidded and content. Caleb rose and scooped him into his arms, the boy's small arms wrapping around his neck in a sleepy hug. Elena stood and brushed dirt from the seat of her jeans, the final embers of the day's light painting her face in soft warmth. They walked back toward the park entrance, Leo nestled against Caleb's chest, Elena's head leaning into Caleb's shoulder. She reflected on how much had changed since she first arrived at Stonegate as a night janitor. The anonymity, the fear of discovery, the midnight patches submitted under a false name. Each act of courage had led them here, to this moment of quiet triumph. At the edge of the park, they paused under the lamppost where string lights twinkled like constellations in miniature. Leo wriggled free and stretched, blinking against the emerging dusk. "Can we come back tomorrow?" he asked, eyes wide with wonder at the fading colors. Elena and Caleb exchanged a glance and nodded in unison. "Every day, if you like," Elena replied, lifting Leo so he could reach for the lights. He giggled as he tapped one gently, enchanted by the soft glow. Elena watched him, feeling a profound sense of home that she had never known before. Caleb turned to her, his gaze steady and full of admiration. "We've come a long way," he said, voice tender. Elena nodded, her heart full. "We have," she agreed. She thought of the stormy boardroom meeting when Miles had tried to undo everything she'd built, of the courtroom where she had finally exonerated herself, and of the podium at the Tech Summit where she had declared that brilliance transcends title. Yet none of those triumphs compared to this simple walk in the park where love and belonging proved themselves the most powerful forces of all. Hand in hand, they stepped out of the park and onto the quiet street beyond. The city lights blinked awake, the skyline a tapestry of hope and possibility. Leo scampered ahead, his laughter echoing in the cool evening air. Elena and Caleb followed, their steps synchronized, their spirits light. In that moment, the story of Elena Reed, the hidden engineer, the fearless whistleblower, the redeemer of codes, found its beginning rather than its end. For every path she had walked in darkness, she now walked in the glow of recognition and love. And as they disappeared into the night, three figures drawn together by courage, code, and quiet resilience, they carried with them the knowledge that the truest measure of success lies not in how far we climb, but in how deeply we connect and how boldly we live. Elena Reed's story reminds us that our true value is not defined by the uniforms we wear or the titles we hold, but by the integrity and courage with which we pursue our work. She faced blacklisting and scorn after exposing wrongdoing, only to find herself reduced to janitorial duties. Yet she refused to abandon her skills or her principles. Rather than allowing others to dictate her worth, she continued to code in secret, driven by the conviction that protecting people's livelihoods and data was more important than personal acclaim. When she finally revealed herself, it was not to claim credit, but to stand up for what was right. Her journey teaches us several enduring lessons. First, never underestimate the power of persistence. Even when doors are slammed in our faces, quiet determination can open new paths. Second, true expertise shines through obstacles. Competence coupled with integrity will eventually break down barriers. Third, Leadership means recognizing and uplifting hidden talent. Caleb Stone's willingness to look past Elena's job description transformed both her life and his company's future. Fourth, authenticity matters. By stepping out of the shadows under her real name, Elena claimed control of her narrative and inspired others to do the same. Finally, the greatest victories are not only professional but personal. Elena's reconciliation with her son and her newfound sense of belonging demonstrate that achievements are sweetest when shared with family and community. If Elena's journey has resonated with you, remember that every setback can be a setup for a comeback. Hold fast to your principles, believe in your own capabilities, and be the ally who recognizes talent where others might only see a title. Change often begins with a single act of courage. What will yours be? Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss another inspiring journey.